I am Chris. I'm 27 years old, and at the celebratory dinner for my own Stanford MBA graduation, my father looked me dead in the eye and told me he wished I'd never been born. Before I tell you how I walked out of that restaurant and completely erased myself from their lives, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's good to know we're all in this together. The clinking of silverware on porcelain sounded like thunder in the sudden silence. My mother's wine glass, halfway to her lips, froze in midair. Across the table, my professor, Dr. Miller, who had just been praising my thesis, looked like he'd swallowed a wasp. The entire private dining room at Delmonico's, a place I had chosen and paid for myself, was holding its breath. Every single person, my friends, my mentors, the managers from my new consulting firm, was staring at my father, Robert Adams, whose face was a mask of cold disappointment, and then staring at me. "We wish you'd never been born." The words didn't just hang in the air. They landed like physical blows. Each syllable was a punch to the gut, stealing the air from my lungs. This wasn't a heated argument. It was a declaration, a verdict on my entire existence, delivered with the casual cruelty of a man swatting a fly. For a split second, the world went blurry. I could feel the familiar sting behind my eyes, the hot shame creeping up my neck. The old me, the little boy who lived his life desperate for a scrap of approval, wanted to shrink into his chair, to apologize for what? For breathing? For succeeding? For daring to celebrate a milestone he thought would finally make them proud? But then, something inside me snapped. Not with a loud crack, but with a quiet, clean break. It was the sound of the last thread of hope finally giving way. The hope that had kept me sending money home, sacrificing opportunities, and biting my tongue for 27 years. I looked from my father's stony face to my mother's, who was now studiously avoiding my gaze, her expression a familiar mix of passive agreement and feigned helplessness. I stood up. My chair didn't scrape the floor. The movement was slow, deliberate. I felt a strange calm wash over me, the kind of clarity that only comes after the worst storm has passed. I looked my father in the eye. "Wish granted," I said. My voice was even devoid of the tremor I expected. "Live your lives as though your son, Chris, never existed." I let the words settle. I saw the flicker of shock in my father's eyes, the first crack in his arrogant facade. He expected me to cry, to beg, to crumble. He didn't expect this. The silence that followed was absolute. The party was over. But before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand how we got to this point. You need to understand the weight of being the wrong son. My entire childhood was a masterclass in comparison. There were two sons in the Adams household, but only one ever seemed to matter. My younger brother, Alex, was the sun around which my parents' world revolved. And I was just a shadow, a quiet, dutiful satellite orbiting his brilliance. Alex was going to be a doctor. That was the family mantra, repeated at every holiday, every family gathering, every parent-teacher conference. "Alex is so gifted," my mother would say, beaming. "He's going to save lives." And me? I was good at math. I was reliable. I was the one who learned how to patch a leaky roof at 14 because the handyman was too expensive and my dad, Robert, said I needed to learn the value of real work. I remember that October afternoon vividly. Rain was dripping into a bucket in the living room. Thump, thump, thump. A steady, maddening rhythm. I spent 6 hours on that roof in the cold drizzle, my fingers numb, my clothes soaked through. When I finally came down, shivering and covered in tar, I found my parents and Alex in the kitchen. They were celebrating. Alex had gotten a B+ on a biology midterm. "We're so proud of you, champ," my father boomed, ruffling Alex's hair. On the table was a brand new, top-of-the-line computer. His reward. I stood in the doorway, dripping onto the linoleum. My mother glanced at me, her nose wrinkling slightly. "Chris, don't track that mess in here. Go take a shower." There was no thank you, no good job, just an order. The roof didn't leak anymore, but it was as if the work had been done by a ghost. That was the pattern. When I was 16, I bought my first car, a beat-up '98 Civic that I paid for with 2 years of savings from bagging groceries. It backfired and smelled like burning oil, but it was mine. 6 months later, for Alex's 16th birthday, my parents bought him a brand new Toyota Camry. A doctor needs a reliable vehicle, my father explained, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. I never complained. Complaining would have been seen as jealousy, as being ungrateful. Instead, I worked harder. I got straight A's. I became captain of the debate team. I won a state-level scholarship for college. Each achievement was a desperate plea. See me. See what I can do. Am I enough yet? Each time, the response was lukewarm at best. Oh, that's nice, Chris, my mother would say, before immediately changing the subject. Did you hear? Alex's volunteer work at the hospital was written up in the local newsletter. The worst was always Christmas. Christmas was the annual showcase of my secondary status. When I was 17, I worked a miserable seasonal job at a shipping warehouse to save up. I spent weeks listening to what my parents said they wanted. My mom had been complaining about their old, grainy television. My dad had mentioned his favorite leather recliner was falling apart. I saved every single penny. I bought them a brand new flat-screen TV and a plush, comfortable recliner. I was so proud. I could barely sleep on Christmas Eve. I imagined their faces when they saw the gifts, the surprise, the pride. I imagined finally getting that hug that wasn't just a quick, obligatory pat on the back. On Christmas morning, I watched as they unwrapped my presents. "Oh, Chris," my mother said, her voice strained. "You shouldn't have. This is too much." My father just grunted and poked at the chair. There was no joy, just a kind of awkwardness, as if my grand gesture had somehow inconvenienced them. Then it was Alex's turn. He handed them a single, clumsily wrapped package. Inside was a framed photo of himself in a lab coat, taken at a high school science fair. He'd scribbled on the back, "To the best parents, from your future doctor." My mother burst into tears, actual happy tears. "Oh, Alex, it's the most thoughtful thing I've ever seen," she cried, clutching the frame to her chest. My father stood up and gave Alex a bear hug. "That's my boy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's my son." I sat there, next to $1,000 worth of gifts I had nearly killed myself to buy, and I had never felt more invisible. The TV and the recliner were just things. The framed photo was a symbol, a testament to the son they truly valued. It was a brutal lesson. My effort would never, ever outweigh his existence. I learned to live on crumbs of affection. A rare nod of approval from my father was a feast that could sustain me for weeks. But the main course, the unconditional love and pride, was always reserved for Alex. I told myself it was because his path was nobler. A doctor, saving lives. What was a business degree compared to that? I swallowed the injustice and told myself that one day, I would do something so undeniably impressive that they would have no choice but to see me, to finally be proud of me. It was a foolish hope, but it was the only thing that kept me going. College was my escape, but it was also where my role as the family support system was truly cemented. I attended the state university on a partial scholarship, but I worked 30 hours a week waiting tables at a greasy spoon diner to cover the rest. The place smelled of stale coffee and bacon fat, and the customers were often rude, but the tips were decent if you were fast. I lived in a cramped dorm room with 3 other guys, and my diet consisted mostly of ramen and the occasional free burger from my job. I didn't mind. It was the price of freedom. But the calls from home never stopped. They rarely started with a request. They were more insidious than that. "Hi, honey." My mother's voice would chirp through the phone. "How are your little business classes going?" The condescension was subtle but always there. After a few minutes of small talk about the weather or a neighbor's dog, the real reason for the call would emerge. "You know, Alex is just working so hard at pre-med. The textbooks alone are a fortune, and his organic chemistry lab has all these extra fees." The sentence would trail off, a hook baited and left dangling in the water, and I always took the bait. "How much does he need, Mom?" The first time it was $200. I had just gotten my paycheck and was planning to buy a decent winter coat. My old one had a broken zipper and was thin as paper. Instead, I went to the bank and wired the money. I told myself it was a one-time thing. I wore 2 sweatshirts under my old coat for the rest of the winter. It wasn't a one-time thing. The calls became a regular occurrence, a monthly ritual of emotional extortion. The car needs new tires, and your father needs it to get to work, but we need the savings for Alex's MCAT prep course. The electricity bill is a bit high this month, and Alex needs to have his study lamp on all night. It was always about Alex, or a family need that somehow always benefited him. They never asked about my expenses, my struggles. They just assumed that my business thing meant I had disposable income. They didn't see the double shifts, the missed social events, the nights I spent studying until 3 a.m. after a grueling shift at the restaurant. One of my co-workers at the diner, a tough older woman named Flo, noticed. "Kid, you work more than anyone I know," she said one night, pouring me a cup of coffee. "You savon up for something special? Just helping out my family?" I mumbled, too embarrassed to explain. She gave me a long, hard look. "Family's supposed to help you, too. Don't you forget that." The biggest sacrifice came in my junior year. I was accepted into a study abroad program in London. It was my dream, a chance to see the world, to learn, to be someone other than Alex's brother. The program fee was steep, but I had been saving meticulously for over a year. I had just enough. I'd tacked the brochure to the corkboard above my desk, a vibrant picture of Tower Bridge that represented a world beyond my cramped life. 2 weeks before the non-refundable deposit was due, my mother called, crying. It was a different kind of crying this time. Not the manipulative sniffles, but full-blown, panicked sobs. "Chris, I don't know what we're going to do," she wailed. "Your father and we had a huge fight. He's threatening a divorce. It's the financial stress. The tuition installment for Alex is due, and your father's hours at the plant were cut back. We're going to be short." The word divorce hit me like a physical blow. It was the ultimate trump card. "What about the college fund you guys set up for him?" I asked, my voice tight. "The one you always talked about?" There was a pause. "Oh, that ran out a long time ago, honey. Med school is it's a different league," she said, her voice now laced with a kind of manipulative guilt. "We can't lose the house over this, Chris. And if your father leaves, what will happen to Alex's future? What will happen to his own inheritance one day if we lose everything now?" She was comparing my dream of a semester in Europe to the very fabric of our family falling apart, to the future of their golden child. How could I say no? I looked at the London brochure pinned to my wall. The picture of Tower Bridge seemed to mock me. I felt a wave of resentment so strong it made me dizzy. But it was quickly drowned out by a lifetime of conditioning. Family comes first. Be the good son. Be reliable. Fix this. "I'll send it, Mom," I said, my voice hollow. I walked to the bank in a daze. The teller, a friendly woman who knew me by name, smiled. "Big withdrawal today, Chris? Going somewhere fun?" "No," I said, unable to meet her eyes. "Just taking care of things at home." I never told them about the study abroad program. I never told them that the money they took for Alex's tuition was the cost of my dream. I just quietly withdrew from the program, telling my advisor that something had come up at home, because in my family something always did, and I was always the one expected to fix it. That night, I took the London brochure down from my wall, tore it into tiny pieces, and let them fall into the trash can like confetti at a funeral. Getting into Stanford for my MBA felt like a miracle. It was the validation I had been chasing my entire life. This wasn't just the state university anymore. This was Stanford. The name alone carried a weight that I thought even my parents would have to acknowledge. For 2 years, I worked harder than I ever had in my life. It was a world of brilliant minds and cutthroat competition, but for the first time I felt like I belonged. My professors saw my potential. My classmates respected my work ethic. I landed a dream internship that turned into a 6-figure job offer at a top consulting firm in Seattle 6 months before I even graduated. My life was finally taking shape, a shape that I had built with my own 2 hands on my own terms. And as graduation approached, that old, foolish hope began to stir again. This will be it, I told myself. An MBA from Stanford. Prestigious job. This is the undeniable success that will finally make them proud. I decided to throw a graduation party. Not a small get-together, but a real celebration. I booked the private room at Delmonico's, a fancy Italian restaurant downtown. I curated the menu, chose the wine, and invited everyone who had supported me along the way. My favorite professors, my study group, my new boss and a few colleagues, and my closest friends. And, of course, my family. My hand was shaking a little as I dialed the number. I rehearsed the opening line in my head, trying to sound casual and confident. "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice a little too bright. "So, graduation is in a few weeks, and I'm having a small party to celebrate. I'd love for you, Dad, and Alex to come." "Oh," she said. Her tone was flat. There was no excitement, no congratulations. Just, "Oh, a party? Isn't that a bit extravagant, Chris?" "It's a big deal, Mom. I want to celebrate it. I've already taken care of everything. You guys just have to show up." "Well, I don't know. Your father's been working a lot. And Alex is swamped with his rotations at the hospital. Seattle is a long drive, you know. The gas alone." Every word was a pinprick, deflating my excitement. They weren't asking about my classes, my job, my life. They were already making excuses. They were making my success sound like an inconvenience. "It would mean a lot to me if you were there," I said, the desperation clear in my voice. I hated how I sounded, like that little boy begging for a pat on the head. There was a long sigh on the other end of the line. "All right, Chris. I'll see what we can do. No promises." A few days later, my best friend from my undergrad days, Michelle, called to RSVP. She was the only one who knew the full extent of my family's dysfunction. "Delmonico's? Fancy," she said, her voice warm. "I'm so there. You deserve to celebrate in style." Then her tone shifted, becoming more gentle. "Are you sure about this, Chris? Inviting them, you know how they can be." "I have to I insisted, pacing around my small student apartment. "This time will be different. It has to be. How can they not be proud of this? It's Stanford." I could almost hear her sad smile over the phone. "Because it's not about you, it's about them," she said, her voice laced with a wisdom I didn't want to accept. "Their approval isn't a prize you can win by being successful enough. It's not a competition. Don't set yourself up for a fall. Please, just manage your expectations." "You're wrong," I said, more to convince myself than her. "They'll see. They'll finally see." The night of the party, as I stood in front of my mirror adjusting my tie, I let myself dream. I pictured my father clapping me on the shoulder, a real smile on his face. I imagined my mother telling her friends, "That's my son, the Stanford graduate." I envisioned a night of healing, of acknowledgement. A night where I finally took my place in the family, not as the shadow, but as an equal. I clung to that belief like a life raft. As I walked into Delmonico's, wearing my best suit and a smile that felt both genuine and fragile, I truly believed that this night would be the beginning of a new chapter. The night my family finally saw me, I was so wrong. The party was in full swing by the time they arrived. The room was buzzing with happy conversation, laughter, and the soft clinking of glasses. My boss, Mr. Davidson, a man I respected immensely, was telling a story that had my colleagues roaring with laughter. Professor Miller was engaged in a deep conversation with some of my classmates. Michelle was by my side, a steady, smiling presence. It was perfect. I was surrounded by people who saw me, who valued me. For a moment, I forgot the gnawing anxiety about my family's arrival. And then they walked in. My parents, Robert and Susan Adams, and my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister. Alex was predictably absent. He got called in for an emergency shift. My mother announced to no one in particular, her voice carrying an air of importance. "Saving lives, you know. He feels just terrible about missing this." They were over an hour late. They brought no card, no gift, not even a single flower. My father's expression was sour, as if he'd just smelled something bad. He scanned the room with a look of deep suspicion, as if he were casing the joint. My mother wore a tight, forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. I excused myself from my conversation with Mr. Davidson. "Excuse me for one moment, sir. My family has just arrived." He nodded kindly. "Of course, Chris. Go on." I walked over to them, my own smile feeling stiff on my face. "Mom, Dad, Aunt Carol, I'm so glad you could make it." "Well, we're here," my father grunted, shrugging off his coat and handing it to me as if I were the coat check boy. My mother pecked the air near my cheek. "It's a very loud place, Chris. A bit much, don't you think?" Aunt Carol, a woman who had mastered the art of the backhanded compliment, looked around the elegant room. My, you must be making quite the salary to afford all this. I hope you're remembering to be responsible. It's easy for young people to get carried away." I tried to steer them towards the group. "I'd love for you to meet my boss, Mr. Davidson." I led them over. Mr. Davidson stood up, extending his hand with a warm smile. "Robert, Susan, a pleasure to meet you. You must be incredibly proud of Chris. He's a real star." My father gave his hand a single limp shake. "He does all right," he mumbled, before turning away to inspect a painting on the wall. My mother just smiled that tight, vacant smile. The conversation died instantly. It was excruciatingly awkward. I tried again with Professor Miller. "Professor, this is my family." "A delight," Professor Miller said warmly. But before he could say another word, my mother cut him off. "Oh, look, Robert," she said, pulling a photo out of her purse. "I have to show Carol this picture of Alex in his new scrubs. Doesn't he look like a real doctor?" They found a corner table and sat there like judges, observing the proceedings with an air of detached disapproval. They spoke only to each other and to Aunt Carol, their voices low and conspiratorial. I felt a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. The joy that had filled the room just moments before now felt fragile, tainted by their presence. Michelle came over and squeezed my arm. "You okay?" she whispered. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "They just need some time to warm up." But they didn't warm up. They deflected every attempt at conversation, turning every topic back to Alex. My achievements, the reason we were all there, were treated like an inconvenient footnote. Aunt Carol was the worst. She cornered me near the bar. "Christopher, dear," she said, patting my arm in a way that was meant to seem affectionate but felt like a spider crawling on my skin. "It's so wonderful you have this business acumen. But you must be so proud of your brother. He has a real calling, so much more meaningful than just chasing dollars, don't you think?" I just nodded, my jaw tight. There was no point in arguing. I tried to ignore it. I talked to my guests, I laughed. But I was acutely aware of the black hole of negativity emanating from that corner table. They were a vortex, sucking the happiness out of my celebration. And I knew, with a sinking feeling, that the night was headed for a collision. I just didn't know how brutal it would be. The tipping point came during the toasts. It was the part of the evening I had been both anticipating and dreading. My best friend, Michelle, stood up first. Her glass of champagne caught the light. "To Chris," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I've known him since we were freshmen, eating instant noodles and cramming for exams. I've watched him work 2 jobs while taking a full course load. I've seen him sacrifice and struggle and never, ever give up. He is the most determined and deserving person I know. Chris, I am so incredibly proud of you." The room erupted in applause, and I felt a genuine warmth spread through my chest. I looked over at my parents' table. My mother was clapping politely, a few slow, measured claps. My father's arms were crossed over his chest. He wasn't clapping at all. Next, my boss, Mr. Davidson, stood up. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, people listened. "I don't give praise lightly," he said, his voice commanding the room. "But in the short time Chris has been with our firm, he has demonstrated an intellect and a work ethic that are second to none. Our firm is lucky to have him." To Chris. More applause. more pride swelling in my chest. I chanced another look at my father. He was now examining a fork, as if it were the most fascinating object in the world. Finally, Professor Miller, my thesis advisor, stood up. He was a kind, elderly man with a brilliant mind and a gentle soul. "I've had many students over my 40 years of teaching," he began, his voice warm and grandfatherly. "But Chris stands out, not just for his intellect, which is considerable, but for his tenacity, his resilience. He has an ability to see problems from unique angles and the courage to pursue unconventional solutions." He smiled at me, a genuine, proud smile that felt more paternal than anything I'd ever gotten from my own father. Then, he turned his gaze toward my parents' table. "Robert, Susan, you must be incredibly proud." It was a simple, kind statement, a social softball lobbed over the plate. All they had to do was smile and nod, agree with the esteemed professor, accept the compliment on behalf of their son. But they didn't. My mother picked up her wine glass and took a slow, deliberate sip. She placed it back on the table with a soft click. "Of course, we're proud of both our sons," she said, her voice just loud enough to carry across the hushed room. It had a brittle, defensive quality. "But it's like we always say, Alex is the one who's really making a difference in the world. Saving lives, it's a noble calling." A wave of uncomfortable silence rippled through the room. My friends shot me worried glances. Michelle's face hardened. Professor Miller's smile faltered. He looked confused, as if he'd misspoken or caused offense. My father, never one to be outdone, decided to drive the knife in deeper. He let out a short, humorless laugh, a sound like rocks grinding together. "An MBA is fine for making money," he said, waving his hand dismissively as if shooing away a fly. "But you can't compare that to the importance of being a doctor. It's a different league entirely." The humiliation was a physical thing. It was hot, prickly, and it washed over me in waves. He hadn't just insulted me. He had belittled my professors, my colleagues, and my entire field of study in one fell swoop. He had taken my proudest moment and thrown it back in my face like garbage. I looked at my cousin, Leo, who was sitting at a nearby table. We had been close as kids, building forts and riding bikes. He knew the whole story. He knew about the sacrifices, the blatant favoritism. I caught his eye, silently pleading for some kind of support, a nod, anything. He just looked at me with an expression of pure pity, then quickly looked down at his plate, suddenly fascinated by his half-eaten bread roll. It was a small betrayal, but it cut deep. He was choosing to stay silent, choosing their side, choosing not to make waves. That's when I felt the shift inside me, the desperation to please them, the lifelong ache for their approval, began to curdle into a cold, hard anger. I had done everything right. I had worked, I had sacrificed, I had achieved. And it still wasn't enough. It would never be enough. And then my father delivered the final, fatal blow, the one that would incinerate the last remnants of our relationship. My father wasn't done. He saw the look on my face, the stunned silence of my guests, and he interpreted it not as shock at his cruelty, but as a challenge to his authority. He thrived on confrontation, especially when he held all the emotional power. "What's that look for?" he snarled, his voice low and menacing. His knuckles were white where he gripped his water glass. "You think you're better than us now with your fancy degree and your big city job? Let me tell you something. We sacrificed for you, too. We put a roof over your head." The sheer audacity of it left me speechless. Sacrificed? They had sacrificed nothing. They had taken. They had used me as their personal ATM, their emotional punching bag, their reliable, invisible son. The room was so quiet you could hear the fizz of the champagne bubbles in the glasses. I finally found my voice. Came out hoarse, raw with years of suppressed pain. "Sacrificed? When did you sacrifice?" My own question hung in the air, sharp and dangerous. "Was it when I was on the roof in the rain fixing a leak while you bought Alex a new computer? Or was it when I wired you my dream of studying abroad, so you could pay for Alex's extra fees?" My mother gasped, placing a hand over her heart as if I'd wounded her. "Christopher, how dare you bring that up here? This is not the time or the place." She was trying to shut it down, to shame me back into silence. "No, this is the perfect time and the perfect place," I countered, my voice growing stronger with every word. I felt something breaking free inside me, because this was supposed to be the one night that wasn't about him. The one night you were supposed to be proud of me, but you couldn't even do that. You couldn't give me one evening without comparing me, without diminishing me, without making it clear that I will always be second best. My father's face was turning a dangerous shade of red. He stood up, knocking his chair back slightly. The full force of his narcissistic rage was now directed at me. "We gave you life," he boomed, his voice echoing in the silent room. "And this is the thanks we get? You're ungrateful. After everything, you're just an ungrateful, selfish boy." He leaned forward, his finger jabbing the air in my direction. And then came the words that ended everything, the words that set me free. "We wish you'd never been born." And that was it. That was the moment from the beginning of our story tonight. The moment the world stopped. The moment the old Chris died. As I described before, a strange calm settled over me. I stood up, feeling taller than I ever had in my life. I looked at my father, at my mother, at my aunt, and I saw them for what they were. Small, bitter people, incapable of the love I had so desperately craved. "Wish granted," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Live your lives as though your son, Chris, never existed." I took my wallet out of my jacket pocket. I pulled out my credit card and placed it firmly on the center of the table. "For the meal," I said to no one in particular. It was another symbolic act. My final payment. The last thing I would ever give them. Then I turned, and without looking back, I walked out of the restaurant. I walked past the shocked faces of my friends and colleagues. Michelle made a move to follow me, but I gave a slight shake of my head. I needed to do this alone. I walked out into the cool Seattle night air, leaving behind the smoking crater of what used to be my family. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for sure. I was finally terrifyingly free. The days that followed were a blur of numb efficiency. I didn't break down. I didn't cry. I just moved. It felt like my emotions were encased in a block of ice, and all I could do was function around it. First, I found a new apartment, a small one-bedroom place in Bellevue, across the lake from Seattle. My previous place had been a month-to-month student housing situation. This was my first real home. I spent a weekend looking at sterile, cookie-cutter complexes before finding a unit in an older, charming brick building. The landlady, a kind woman in her 70s named Mrs. Gable, had a warm smile and reminded me of my grandmother. "You've got a good, honest face," she said as I filled out the application. That simple, unearned kindness almost broke me. The day I got the keys, I walked into the empty space. The afternoon sun streamed through the large windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It smelled of old wood and fresh paint. It was quiet, so incredibly quiet. There were no ghosts of expectation lurking in the corners. I stood in the middle of the living room, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. Next, I handled communications. I went through my phone and deleted every number associated with that side of my life. My father, my mother, my aunt, even Alex. Then I blocked them. I went on social media, a place I rarely used, and systematically blocked them all. I wrote a single, brief email to my cousin Leo and a few other extended family members who had been at the party. As you witnessed, my parents and I have had a complete and final falling out. I am taking them at their word and removing myself from their lives, as they wished. I ask you to respect my decision. I wish you all the best. I knew it was harsh, but it was necessary. I needed a clean break, a total amputation. There could be no room for negotiation or guilt-tripping. Then I threw myself into my work. My new job, which should have been a source of joy and excitement, became my sanctuary. The world of financial models, market analysis, and client presentations was logical. It had rules. Effort directly correlated with results. It was everything my family life was not. My boss, Mr. Davidson, who had witnessed the whole ugly scene, was a model of quiet support. He never mentioned the party. He just gave me the most challenging project he had, a high-stakes account that a senior consultant had been struggling with. "I think you can handle this," was all he said. It was a vote of confidence, and I grabbed onto it like a drowning man. Michelle was my rock. She called every day. She didn't push me to talk about it. She just checked in, told me a funny story about her day, and reminded me to eat. One Saturday, she showed up at my new, mostly empty apartment with a pizza and a six-pack of beer. We sat on the floor and ate in comfortable silence. "It's okay to not be okay, you know?" she said softly after a while. "I know," I said. "But right now, not okay feels like a luxury I can't afford. If I let myself feel it, I'm afraid I'll fall apart. It's easier to just keep moving." She nodded, understanding. "Okay, then we move. What's first on the list for this new bachelor pad?" "A couch," I said, "and maybe a lamp." We spent the rest of the weekend at thrift stores and IKEA, buying mismatched but comfortable furniture. As we were assembling a complicated-looking bookshelf, laughing as we tried to decipher the Swedish instructions, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. A simple, uncomplicated happiness. Later that week, while unpacking the last of my boxes from college, I found an old accordion file filled with financial records. Tucked inside was a folder labeled Family Support. Out of a morbid curiosity, I opened it. Inside were old bank statements, records of wire transfers. And then I saw it. A printout of a transfer from 3 years prior. A large sum, 5 figures. In the memo line, I had typed, "For Alex's supplementary college fund." The memory of the phone call, my mother's tearful voice, the London brochure, it all came rushing back. I stared at the piece of paper, a relic from a life that no longer felt like mine. At the time, I just put it back in the folder. I had no idea that this innocuous piece of paper would soon become the most important weapon in my arsenal. The silence from my family was deafening for about a month. Then the whispers started. They came indirectly, through the grapevine of extended family, a well-oiled machine of gossip and judgment that my Aunt Carol expertly conducted. The first volley came from my great-aunt Martha. She called on a Sunday morning, her voice dripping with syrupy disappointment. "Christopher, it's your Aunt Martha. I just got off the phone with your mother. She's heartbroken, absolutely beside herself. How could you abandon your family after all they've done for you? It's a sin, that's what it is." I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. "Thank you for your concern, Aunt Martha," I said calmly. "But this is a private matter between me and my parents. I have to go now." I hung up before she could respond. The narrative had been spun. I was the villain, the cold, ungrateful son who got a fancy degree and decided he was too good for his simple, loving family. My Aunt Carol was the chief architect of this story, of course. She painted a picture of my poor, bewildered parents, who had simply made an off-the-cuff remark under stress, only to have their cruel son use it as an excuse to cut them off. The story conveniently omitted the years of financial and emotional exploitation. It hurt, but it didn't surprise me. It was easier for them to brand me as a monster than to confront their own monstrous behavior. I just kept my head down and focused on work, letting the whispers fade into background noise. The real shock, the revelation that changed everything, came from Michelle. We were having dinner one night at a quiet Thai restaurant, a weekly ritual we had started. She had been quiet for most of the meal, a troubled look on her face. "There's something I need to tell you, Chris," she said finally, pushing her pad thai around her plate. "And I've kept it to myself for years because I didn't want to hurt you, and it wasn't my place. But now, with everything that's happened, I think you need to know the truth." I braced myself. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. "Back in sophomore year of college, I went on a few dates with Alex." I stared at her, stunned. It felt like a betrayal, even though it had happened years ago. "You and Alex? You never told me that." "It was brief and a huge mistake," she said quickly, her eyes pleading with me to understand. "He was charming at first. You know how he can be. But I saw another side of him pretty quickly. He was always broke, always asking to borrow money, which I thought was weird given how much your parents seemed to dote on him. She continued, her voice low. One night, we were supposed to go to a movie, but he said he needed to make a stop first. He drove us to this industrial part of town, down a dark alley. He told me to wait in the car. I was freaked out, so after a few minutes, I got out and looked through the grimy window of this warehouse. It was some kind of dingy underground poker game. My blood ran cold. Poker? It was more than that, Chris, she said, her eyes filled with concern. It was serious. Guys with angry faces, piles of cash on the table. The air was thick with smoke and desperation. I watched Alex lose a lot of money that night. Money I know he didn't have. He got desperate, angry. He started yelling at the dealer. It was scary. I ran back to the car before he could see me. She looked down at her hands. I ended things right after that. He called me, begging me not to tell anyone, especially you. He said you wouldn't understand, that you were always judging him. He fed me some sob story about pressure and needing an outlet. The pieces started clicking into place with a sickening finality. The constant, urgent need for money. The vague, extra fees and tuition installments. My mother's desperate phone calls, the fights with my father, the threat of divorce. It wasn't about tuition. It wasn't about stress. It was about feeding an addiction. He has a gambling problem, I said, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. A bad one, Michelle confirmed. Chris, that money you were sending home? For his college fund? For all those emergencies. I don't think it was going to the school. The world tilted on its axis. All those years. All my sacrifices. My coat in the winter. My dream of London. The double shifts at the diner. It wasn't for his education. It wasn't to help him become a doctor. I had been funding my brother's addiction. And my parents, they had to have known. There was no other explanation. They weren't just enabling him. They were using me to do it. They were complicit. They had lied to my face, manipulated my love for them, and stolen my future to clean up their golden child's messes. The ice around my heart didn't just crack. It exploded. And for the first time since that night at the restaurant, I felt something other than numbness. I felt a pure, white-hot rage. A rage that was cold and clear and absolute. 3 months after the party, I was in the zone. The project Mr. Davidson had given me was consuming all my energy, and I was thriving on the pressure. I was making a name for myself at the firm. I was building a new life, brick by painful brick. I had finally found my footing, and that's when they tried to pull the rug out from under me. I was walking through the sleek, glass-walled lobby of my office building after a coffee run, mentally rehearsing a presentation for the afternoon. The automatic doors slid open, and my heart stopped. There they were, my father and my mother, standing in the middle of the corporate lobby like ghosts from a past life. They looked out of place. My father's jacket was too tight, my mother's floral dress too bright against the sea of gray and navy business suits. They looked smaller than I remembered, weaker, and they looked desperate. My first instinct was to turn around and walk away, to get in the elevator and disappear. But then I thought, no, this is my territory, my place of work, my new life. I will not let them make me run. I walked towards them, my expression carefully neutral. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. What are you doing here? My mother rushed forward, her hands fluttering nervously. Christopher, we need to talk to you. We've been calling. I know, I said coldly. I blocked your numbers. My father stepped forward, his face set in the familiar, arrogant lines I knew so well. But underneath the arrogance, I saw something new, fear. We're not here to play games, boy, he snapped, though his voice lacked its usual booming conviction. This is serious. A few of my colleagues, including my ambitious rival, Mark Landon, were starting to notice the commotion. They slowed their pace as they walked by, pretending to check their phones but listening intently. My office is not the place for this, I said, keeping my voice low. You need to leave. We're not leaving until you listen. my mother pleaded, her voice starting to take on that whiny, manipulative edge. It's about Alex. Of course, it was always about Alex. He's in some trouble, my father said gruffly. A financial bind. He made a mistake, a miscalculation with his student loans. He needs help to clear it up, or he won't be able to finish his residency. A miscalculation. The lie was so blatant, so insulting to my intelligence, that I almost laughed. After the revelation from Michelle, the lie was transparent. They were still protecting him, still lying for him, and they had the gall to come here, to my place of success, and ask me to be their accomplice, to ask me to pay for it. How much? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. My father named a number. It was staggering. Enough for a down payment on a house. It was a sum that could cripple someone just starting out. He needs it, Chris? My mother insisted, her voice rising with emotion. He's so close to becoming a doctor. You wouldn't want to be the one to stand in the way of that, would you? After all this family has invested in him. The word family coming from her lips was poison. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it landed with the force of a slammed door. My father's eyes narrowed. What did you say? I said no. I repeated, louder this time. Mark Landon was now openly staring, a smug look on his face, clearly enjoying the drama. I will not give you a single cent. My father's face contorted with rage. His fear was gone, replaced by his old, familiar fury. You ungrateful brat. After everything we've done for you, you have a moral obligation. You have a duty to your brother. With the salary you're making in this ridiculous place, it's a drop in the bucket. He was shouting now. The lobby had gone quiet. The receptionist was looking on with wide, alarmed eyes. And that's when I decided that the truth, which I had been holding onto like a secret, was finally ready to be set free. It wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about exposing them. A moral obligation? I asked, my voice ringing out in the suddenly silent lobby. I took a step closer to them, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of real fear in my mother's eyes. They were used to me folding. They weren't prepared for this. Let's talk about moral obligations, I continued, my voice cold and sharp as glass. Let's talk about the obligation of parents not to lie to their son. Let's talk about the obligation of a brother not to steal from his own blood to pay for his sordid little habits. We have no idea what you're talking about, my mother stammered, clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. Alex would never steal. Oh, I think you do, I said. I reached into my briefcase, which I had thankfully brought with me on my coffee run. My fingers closed around the folded piece of paper I had put there that very morning. A copy of the bank statement from my college days. A piece of my past I now realized I had carried with me for a reason. I held it up. I'm not talking about student loans, and you know it. I'm talking about a gambling addiction. The color drained from my mother's face. My father's jaw went slack. They looked like criminals caught in the harsh glare of a spotlight. I know everything, I said, letting the paper drop onto the polished marble floor between us. It landed with a soft, final sound. I know about the poker games. I know about the debts. And I know that for years, every dollar I sent home for his college fund, for his tuition, for his lab fees, was going straight into a black hole to pay off his bookies. My father found his voice, a weak, sputtering imitation of his usual bluster. That's a lie. Who told you this nonsense? It was that girl, wasn't it? That Michelle. Stop it, I commanded, and my voice had a power in it that shocked even me. It was the voice of a man who had nothing left to lose. Just for once in your life, stop lying. Stop protecting him. You've been enabling him, and you used me to do it. You used my love for this family, my sense of duty, as a weapon against me. You let me sacrifice my own dreams so he could throw the money away on a losing hand. Right at that moment, as if on cue, the elevator doors chimed and Mr. Davidson, the CEO, walked out into the lobby. He stopped short, taking in the scene me, standing tall and furious. My parents pale and cornered. the bank statement lying on the floor like an indictment. His presence immediately raised the stakes. My father, seeing my boss, made one last, desperate attempt to regain control. He pointed a trembling finger at me. This is a private family matter. This has nothing to do with his job. We're discussing a family inheritance issue. The lie was pathetic and transparent. I think it has everything to do with character, Mr. Davidson said, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable authority. He walked over and stood beside me, not even glancing at my parents. He looked at me, his expression one of unadulterated respect. I heard enough. It takes a strong man to stand up to that kind of manipulation. My parents froze. The public humiliation, the judgment from a man of power and status, it was their worst nightmare. This was a man whose approval they would have craved, and he had just sided with me, their worthless son, without a moment's hesitation. Mark Landon's smug look had vanished, replaced by one of genuine shock. The fight went out of them completely. Their arrogance and anger dissolved, replaced by a raw, pathetic shame. My father couldn't even look at me. My mother was staring at the floor, her shoulders slumped in defeat. They had been exposed, not just as liars but as failures. Their perfect golden child was a fraud, and their invisible son was the one who now held all the power. Their carefully constructed world had just been demolished in the lobby of my office, and all they could do was stand in the rubble, exposed and disgraced. Without another word, my parents turned and shuffled out of the lobby. They looked like two deflated balloons. The automatic doors slid shut behind them, sealing them out of my life for good. The lobby was still quiet. Mark Landon was staring at me, his usual smirk replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. The receptionist was peeking over her monitor, her mouth agape. Mr. Davidson put a firm, reassuring hand on my shoulder. The character and integrity you just showed, that's not something you can teach, he said, his voice low and for my ears only. That's who you are. Come on, walk with me. He led me toward the elevators, away from the prying eyes. I'm sorry you had to deal with that in our lobby, he said as the doors closed, whisking us upwards. I'm sorry you had to witness it, I replied, my adrenaline starting to fade, leaving me feeling shaky. Don't be, he said, looking at me directly. It told me more about you than any resume ever could. You know, my own father was a difficult man. Not in the same way, but he was hard, demanding. I learned a long time ago that sometimes the most courageous business decision you can make is knowing when to cut your losses, even when it's personal. You just did that, with grace under pressure. We arrived at the executive floor. He led me into his spacious corner office, the Seattle skyline sprawling out behind him. The work you've done on the Peterson account has been exceptional, he continued, getting straight to business. You took a failing project and turned it around. We're giving you the lead on the full project rollout. It's going to come with a significant promotion to senior consultant and a raise to match. You've earned it, Chris. I was speechless. In the span of 10 minutes, I had lost a family and gained the respect I had craved my entire life, but from a source I never expected. It wasn't from my blood. It was from my merit. It was real. Later that day, Mark came by my desk. He stood there awkwardly for a moment, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Hey, Adams, he said, not quite meeting my eye. Look, I'm sorry you had to go through that. Thanks, I said, surprised. He let out a short, bitter laugh. You know, it's funny. I've been competing with you since day one. I was always jealous. I figured you were one of those guys who had it all. Great school, family money, everything handed to you. He shook his head, finally looking at me. Turns out, I was dead wrong. What I saw today, man, that was something else. You have my respect. He stuck out his hand. I shook it. It wasn't exactly an apology for being a jerk, but it was a form of acknowledgement, a truce. And in its own way, it meant something. The world I had built for myself, the world based on competence and character, was solidifying around me. It was real, and it was mine. A few weeks passed. The promotion was official and I was buried in work, but it was a good kind of busy. It was constructive, and for the first time, my future felt entirely my own. I had moved on. I assumed they had too. Then, one evening, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello, Chris." It was my mother's voice. It sounded thin and broken, stripped of all its usual manipulative cheer. It was the voice of defeat. "How did you get this number?" I asked, my voice flat. I had changed it after the incident at the office. "I got it from your cousin Leo. He felt sorry for me." "Please don't hang up," she begged. I could hear her start to cry, the soft, gulping sobs I knew so well. They used to be my kryptonite, designed to trigger my guilt and my need to fix things. Now they were just noise. "What do you want, Susan?" I asked, using her first name. The small act of defiance felt monumental. It established a new dynamic. I was no longer her son, the child. I was an adult speaking to another adult who had wronged me. Your father and I, we're so sorry, Chris," she sobbed. "We made a mistake. Terrible mistake. We were just trying to protect your brother. We didn't know what else to do. He's our son." "And what am I?" I asked, the question sharp and cold. She faltered. You're our son too. We love you." The apology I had waited a lifetime to hear was finally here. And I felt nothing. It was an empty, hollow thing. It wasn't born of genuine remorse for how they had treated me. It was born of shame from being publicly exposed. It was the apology of someone who had been caught. "You did know what else to do," I said calmly. "You could have told the truth. You could have gotten him help. You could have stopped lying. You could have been parents to both of your sons, not just one. We can fix this," she pleaded, her voice desperate. "We can be a family again. We can go to counseling. Your brother, he's agreed to go to meetings. He's trying to change. Please, son. We miss you. The holidays are coming up. I can't bear the thought of an empty chair at the table." And there it was. The hook. The appeal to sentiment, to tradition, to the ghost of the family we never were. The old Chris would have caved. He would have seen a glimmer of hope and rushed toward it. But I was no longer the old Chris. "I forgive you," I said, and the words surprised me. But I meant them. "I forgive you, not for you, but for me. I can't carry that anger around anymore. It's too heavy. It's poisoning my new life." A sound of hope, a small gasp, came through the phone. "But forgiveness," I continued, my voice steady and resolute, "doesn't mean reconciliation. That door is closed. I have to protect myself now. You taught me that. Your idea of a family is not a safe place for me. You can't be a part of my life anymore. I need peace, and you too. You are the opposite of peace." I heard my father's voice yelling in the background. "Give me that phone." She must have put me on speaker. His voice came through, full of rage. "After all of this, you're still choosing this path? Fine. Don't come crawling back to us when you need a lawyer for some mess you've made, or when you're going through a funeral all alone." The threats were pathetic, empty. "Goodbye, Susan," I said, ignoring him completely, and I ended the call. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I just felt quiet. The war was finally over, and I had won. Not by defeating them, but by simply walking off the battlefield. A year can change everything. My small, once empty apartment was now a home. It was filled with books, plants, and the warm, comforting clutter of a life well lived. More importantly, it was filled with love. Michelle and I had started dating about 6 months after what I privately called the liberation. Our deep friendship, built on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding, had quietly blossomed into something more. With her, there were no games, no hidden agendas. Just honesty, laughter, and a profound sense of being seen for exactly who I was. She never tried to fix me. She just loved me, scars and all. It was Thanksgiving. The aroma of roast turkey and cinnamon filled our apartment. A year ago, the thought of this holiday would have filled me with a deep sense of dread and obligation. Now it filled me with joy. We weren't having a big, formal dinner. Instead, we had invited our chosen family. My old study group from Stanford was here, Tom and Jessica, who had witnessed the beginning of the end at that fateful dinner. A couple of my close colleagues from work were here, including my former rival Mark, who, after a period of awkwardness, had become a surprisingly good friend. And Mrs. Gable, my sweet, elderly landlady from downstairs, sat in the comfiest armchair, holding court and telling stories about Bellevue in the 1960s. I stood in the kitchen, carving the turkey, while Michelle directed traffic, laughing as Mark struggled to open a bottle of wine. I looked around the room. I saw genuine smiles. I heard easy, unforced laughter. There was no tension, no undercurrent of resentment, no one keeping score. Just a group of people who genuinely cared for one another, gathered together to share a meal and be grateful. This was family. It wasn't defined by blood or obligation. It was defined by choice, by support, by showing up for each other in good times and bad. These were the people who had seen me at my lowest and celebrated me at my highest. They were the ones who brought pizza when I was too sad to cook, who listened when I needed to vent, who cheered my promotion as if it were their own. Later that evening, after the meal was done and we were all lounging in the living room, full and happy, watching a football game, Michelle came and sat beside me on the couch. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "This is nice," she said softly. "Look at what you built, Chris." I knew she didn't just mean the meal or the apartment. She meant this life, this community, this peace. A year ago, I had been standing in the wreckage of my past, feeling utterly alone. Now, I was surrounded by more love than I had ever known. I had spent my whole life trying to earn a seat at a table where I was never truly welcome. I had to be kicked out of that cold, formal dining room to realize I could build my own table and fill it with people who actually wanted me there. My definition of success had changed. It was no longer about a title or a salary big enough to impress people who were determined to be unimpressed. Success was this: the warmth in this room, the easy laughter, the feeling of belonging not because I had to, but because I was wanted. I no longer needed my parents' approval to feel worthy. I no longer needed their permission to be happy. My sense of self-worth wasn't tied to their validation anymore. It was forged in my own resilience, proven by my own achievements, and reflected in the eyes of the people who loved me for me. It was a quiet, unshakable foundation, and it was all mine. Just when I thought the past was truly behind me, an echo from my old life appeared. It arrived not as a phone call or a visit, but as an email, sitting in my inbox with a subject line that made my stomach clench. "Thinking of you." It was from Alex. I hadn't heard a single word from him in over a year. I hesitated for a long moment, my finger hovering over the delete button. Michelle, sensing my change in mood, looked over my shoulder. "You don't have to read that," she said softly. "I know," I said, "but I think I need to." Curiosity, that old, nagging human impulse, got the better of me. I clicked it open. The email was long and rambling, a masterwork of self-pity and blame-shifting. It started with a half-hearted apology. "Hey Chris, I know things got really messed up with Mom and Dad. I'm sorry for my part in all of it. I was going through a lot back then, a lot of pressure you wouldn't understand. There was no real ownership, no mention of the word gambling, no acknowledgement of the lies or the money I had sacrificed. Just vague excuses." He went on to talk about his life. He had finished his residency, but he was struggling. He was drowning in debt, real student loan debt this time, apparently. He hated his job at the hospital. It wasn't the noble, heroic life he had imagined. It was just long hours, crushing bureaucracy, and not nearly enough pay to support the lifestyle he felt he deserved. He was miserable, and he blamed everyone but himself. He blamed the system, his mentors, his parents for pressuring him. He even subtly blamed me, hinting that the family's financial instability after I left had made things harder for him. I read the entire thing, and what I felt was not anger, not even pity. It was a profound and sad sense of detachment. It was like reading about a character in a book I had put down a long time ago. His problems were his own, a world away from the life I had so carefully built. He was still that boy in the framed photo, expecting the world to applaud him just for existing. Then I got to the last paragraph, the real reason for the email, the punchline to this long, pathetic joke. Anyway, I'm trying to get my finances in order. Maybe even start my own small practice someday. The banks won't give me a loan with my current debt-to-income ratio. I was wondering, since you're doing so well, if you would consider co-signing for me. It would just be a formality to get my foot in the door. It would mean the world to me. After all, we're still brothers. I stared at the screen and let out a short, sharp laugh. A laugh of pure, unadulterated disbelief. After everything, after a full year of silence, this is what he reached out for. Not to truly reconnect, not to properly atone, but to ask for something. Again, some things, it seemed, never changed. The old Chris would have agonized over this. He would have felt the pull of guilt, the weight of that word, brother. He would have wondered if this was his one chance to have a relationship with him. But I wasn't the old Chris anymore. That man was long gone. I clicked reply. I typed out a short, simple response. My fingers didn't hesitate. Alex, I'm sorry to hear you're having a difficult time. I genuinely hope you find your way and get the professional help you need for your addiction. However, I am not in a position to co-sign a loan for you or provide any financial assistance. I wish you the best, Chris. I hit send without a moment's hesitation. I felt no guilt, no regret, just the clean, quiet click of a final door swinging shut. And as I closed my laptop, I felt an incredible sense of peace. The echo had faded. The past had no more power over me. My apartment has a small balcony that overlooks the city. It's my favorite spot. Tonight, I'm standing out here, leaning on the railing, watching the endless stream of headlights flowing like rivers of light below. The air is cool and crisp. Michelle is inside, making tea. I can hear the soft murmur of the television. It's a peaceful, ordinary night, and it's the most beautiful thing in the world. A year and a half ago, the thought of this peace, this quiet stability, felt like an impossible dream. My world was defined by a desperate, painful struggle for a love that was never really there. I thought that my value as a person was something that had to be granted to me by my parents. I had to earn it, prove it, achieve it. I was wrong. The pain of that night at the restaurant, the cruelty of my father's words, it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. And it was also the best. It was a fire that burned away all the lies I had been telling myself. It forced me to see the truth, that I couldn't keep setting myself on fire to keep others warm, that you can't get water from a dry well. My father's wish that I had never been born. In a strange way, it came true. The son they knew, the one who lived for their approval, the boy who would sacrifice his own dreams to fix their problems, did cease to exist that night. And in his place, a new man was born. A man who understood his own worth. A man who learned that boundaries are not acts of aggression, but acts of self-preservation. A man who understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away. I learned that the word family is a verb. It's about what you do, how you show up, the love you give and receive. It's not about a shared last name or a biological connection. My real family is in there right now arguing about what movie to watch. And my life is richer and more full of love than I ever could have imagined. Losing the family I was born into was the only way I could finally find the family I belong to. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make a difficult choice to protect your own peace? Share your story in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Take care of yourselves.